all you people, our relatives, our friends, Hashdaratut, good morning.
Good morning.
Salalakam sista, Bedat sawaklam, Stahobchad, Stahobchad, Stahobchad. My name is Fighting Woman, and I'm the daughter of the sea monster man. And I'm so honored to come and say good morning, and you're welcome. Welcome to Indigenous land. Welcome to Indigenous land. Welcome to Indigenous land. It was never for our people to not be inclusive of others. Chief Siash welcomed all the new people that came in the tall ships. He welcomed them to Indigenous land. Remember today, when we are talking to each other about equity and inclusion, that we are standing on the bones of the Muckleshoot and the Dufduwapsh. Both had villages on the Green River here. Chief Siath's mother came from a village on the Green River. And it's so very important that we remember all the people, all the people, all the people. A long time ago, when the world was new, the trees and the plants thought they were people. A long time ago, when the world was new, the winged thought they were people. A long time ago, when the world was new, the people, the beings in the water thought they were people. Aturi tuhak, aturi tuhak. A long time ago, when the world was new, the four-leggeds believed that they were people. Aturi tuhak, aturi tuhak. A long time ago, when the world was new, the humans thought they were people. Everybody was a person, a being that was not less than or greater than another. I'd like to teach you a word this morning. We'll talk about it maybe a little more this afternoon, but the word is Yahau. Can we all say that together? Yahau. Yahau. And that word means, in the first language of this land, to do it together, to move forward and get it done. And actually, even more quite literally, it means it can only be done together. Yahau. We'll sing good morning. Hey, oh, hey, ah, hey, oh, oh, yeah. Hashdaratut. That song was called The Light of Day. It was just the vocables. May we all always see together the light of day. Thank you.
Good morning. And thanks, Pamela, for welcoming us into this space and really setting the tone for today's convening. Much appreciated. And Pamela will continue to join us, and we'll have her presence again during lunch, so looking forward to that. So welcome. This is our first convening and meeting and conference for the Governing for Regional Equity and Inclusion. I'm sorry, we did a lot of discussion around what our name would be, so that's what we failed on. But actually, as part of that naming, we wanted to make sure to point out that this conference is actually focusing on racial equity and racial justice, even though the group has been focusing on regional equity and inclusion, that this convening is focusing on regional racial equity. I want us to start by acknowledging a lot of the organizations and jurisdictions that have been part of this effort. We have, and I'll just point out Benita Horn here, because we started having some conversations a couple years ago about it's really important for us as local governments to come together and convene our jurisdictions. So with Benita from the city of Renton and also Preeti, we said, let's start bringing folks together. As a result, this is what we have. We have a group now that meets a number of jurisdictions, about 20 different jurisdictions and organizations that meet every other month to really advance equity within our own organizations, but also as a region. We have some of those logos up in the back, but just want to acknowledge those who are part of this growing effort. Includes the City of Auburn, City of Bellevue, City of Burien, City of Federal Way, the Government Alliance on Race and Equity, which is a national organization, the City of Issaquah, the City of Kent, King County, City of Kirkland, City of Mercer Island, the Port of Seattle, City of Redmond, City of Renton, City of Sammamish, City of Seattle, City of Shoreline, a very important partner with Sound Cities Association, Tacoma, and Tequila. And in addition, for this particular conference, we've also had a lot of support and participation from King County Library Systems and Wayfind. So let's just acknowledge all the partners that have been working on this. So, and excuse any glitches you might see in terms of the organization. As many folks know, I mean, many of us also come sometimes from doing other work in communities and other things. This is nobody's job was to put this conference together. It's all this collaboration of different jurisdictions and organizations coming together. And so far, we've been able to pull it out. So I'm glad that we've been successful thus far. Just having the presence of folks here is so significant. A lot of government representatives, but also, especially in terms of participation in the panels and other things, we have a very strong community organization. We had about 440 people registered for today, and other people who wanted to join us, and we just had to cut off the registration. So it's great showing. Why are we here today? And I think a lot of folks are familiar with this story in terms of our region and our county. We often talk about, and when we launched our King County Equity and Social Justice work over 10 years ago now, the data was really important, and I think we moved on beyond the data and really focusing on what we're doing and how we can do this work better. But I think reminding the why is extremely important. When we think about life expectancy, for example, there's 12, 15-year difference in terms of life expectancy based on where you live within the county. And we see some very large differences also within jurisdictions. So we can see some of our cities here, for example, in South King County, in which we have a huge difference, 10 years or so between one part of the city and another part of the city. Poverty rates, for example, we have 2 to 3 times higher in the county for Native, Black, and Latinx residents when compared to white residents. Incarceration, huge disproportionality in terms of how Black and brown people are many times more likely to be incarcerated than whites. And we can go on and on just looking at housing, education, all the other indicators about what we see. These decisions, a lot of them have been created by our past decisions and our actions, hundreds of years that have actually created this, but these are actually still being perpetuated by the things that are happening today. So I think oftentimes we think about some of the explicit policies that existed in the past, things such as redlining or covenants, but the racial segregation continue today and many times are exacerbated. If we look at the wealth divide, for example, Black and Latinx communities have continued, post-recession, have continued to lose ground, not only until more recently, in recent years in the county, have they actually started to recover when actually our white residents and household income for those populations was just a blip, right? Because they actually had some accumulated wealth that many of our community did not have. So in terms of those who lost their housing, houses that were foreclosed, et cetera, there's been a huge gap just based on the color of your skin. And it's nothing genetically that is happening, right? It's something in terms of how we've organized our systems. And government has a huge role to play in both contributing to this and also actually addressing these inequities. So race and place are huge predictors in terms of quality of life. But it's also been shown that actually, and the research shows that in places that have smaller inequities, everybody benefits. So we know that's the case. And importantly, this is a lot of King County jurisdictions, and we also have the city of Tacoma. We do need a regional approach to our issues and our challenges. When youth of color in South King County doesn't grow up with the full support, early childhood development support, good schools, is more likely to not finish high school, is more likely to be in contact with the criminal justice system. At the same time, we have some amazing employers here that have to actually look nationally, even internationally, to bring talent. That's lost potential. There's a regional cost to that. So there's not only a human cost, there's an economic cost to this. Also, we know that in terms of just generally in the community, the cost of some of these inequities. When we talk about our organizations too, we know that actually diversity, and this is not some kind of shallow definition of diversity, but racial diversity in particular, is good for the organizations in terms of being able to bring new ideas and actually produce better business products and do better work. So it's not also just an academic exercise in terms of some of the topics we're going to talk about today in terms of within our organization, how we're trying to change our racial composition and create a more racially diverse organization. Why an explicit focus on racial equity? Because we actually could be talking about gender, we could be talking about disabilities. Because regardless of the indicator, again, this is where we see the most persistent challenges and the ones that are actually moving the slowest in terms of improvements, or many times actually moving the wrong way. So we need to begin to focus on these issues, also history of racism and our current practices around this, working at the individual, institutional, and structural levels, and really focusing here as institutions, focusing on the institutional structural levels and systemic levels, because too often these conversations are at the very much at talking about personal racism and our personal racism, but where we know that these systems are embedded in our history and need to actually change the big structures, or else the more superficial conversations are not going to actually get us to the solutions that we want. Today, we're going to look at all these issues that kind of I've been referring to in terms of where we have inequities: housing, transportation, the justice system, plus then some particular practices that we see within government and our other organizations, community engagement, policymaking, leadership development, plus our internal working. So we're thinking about workforce racial diversity, contracting, procurement, workplace culture. So, and creating these changes is hard. And I think it can be, we're going to challenge each other. If you look at the program, we have some excellent sessions. We're going to ask you to actually find your edge, push your edge and your learning edge around here, and seeing whether we all have something to learn. I'm learning every single day around some of this work. It's not easy work, but I think at the end it's going to be the most important work that we can do. So want to, after the great welcoming from Pamela from the Snohomish tribe, now want to welcome Nancy Bacchus, the mayor of Auburn, because we are also in the city of Auburn. So welcome.
Good morning, everyone. Yahow. So I will tell you that I've been in this room many, many times, and I have never seen it quite this full or for quite as an important reason as we are here today. I am really proud to be here to welcome you to not only the city of Auburn. How many of you knew the roads came this far south? They do, so come on back. but also to Green River College campus. Parking today was brought to you by the fact that yesterday was finals. Otherwise, you would have been parking out at Pacific Raceways and we would have been shuttling you in. It's that popular of a campus. I hope you agree that it is a beautiful campus that's representative of the Great Northwest. As we see our region and our communities become more and more diverse, the importance of these conversations that we're going to be having today and learning opportunities simply magnify. Auburn has always valued itself as safe, welcoming, and inclusive. But as we use the lens of time and knowledge to evaluate ourselves, we recognize that we have not always upheld those values. And that is why we're here today. To begin the process of change, we need to start with ourselves. We need to have difficult conversations, as you heard we're going to have today. We're going to be on the edge and challenge ourselves to new and broader perspectives. For the city of Auburn, that means the process is beginning. We've begun the process, but in the new year, we are rolling out an equity initiative for all of our city team. We recognize that we have a greater recognition of what community needs and what our community is telling us about their experiences. We hope that regional opportunities such as this and changes within each of our cities, one by one, can begin to make that shift. Thank you all for joining us today. I look forward to talking with you. I look forward to learning. Yahoo.
Good morning. Thank you so much for being here this morning. I'm Deanna Dawson. I'm the director of the Sound Cities Association. For those of you who don't know who we are, we represent the 38 cities in King County other than Seattle, the more diverse cities actually in King County than Seattle in many cases. We're so excited to be one of the sponsors of this event today. It's such an important conversation, and all of our cities are so committed to this issue. Our board leadership is extremely committed. I'm so excited as I look around this room and I see so many elected officials here, because I think this is something that the elected leaders of this region really need to take ownership of. Because if our elected leaders aren't committing to governing with racial equity, then we won't be able to see the kind of progress and change that we need. So I look around the room and I see Shoreline and Bothell and Des Moines and Renton and Bellevue and Redmond and Auburn and Tukwila, and so many of our cities represented here, and I'm really enthusiastic about it. And I'm also really excited when I look around this room and I see the diversity in our elected officials and how that's changing in this region, and I think that's a really, really exciting development. So I am excited to be here today, both to help moderate a panel for our elected officials, which I hope all of our elected officials will come to that so we can have some great conversations amongst ourselves about what we can be doing to lead with racial equity. But I'm also excited to learn from all of you about what we can be doing as an organization to be a part of the solution in this region. So thank you all so much for being here. Thank you so much to Matthias for helping to organize this wonderful conference, and to the staff from all of our cities who've spent so much time putting this together. Let's have a round of applause for all the planners of this conference. And with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Matthias. Thank you for being here this morning.
All right, thank you. And also I want to acknowledge, actually I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for our King County Executive, Dow Constantine, who wanted to be here, but is traveling at a national conference. So this week has been extremely hard for many of us in the community, and I think many of us have had a very heavy heart this week. Especially given what I know many of you have known Amina Ahmed, recently appointed to CTAC Council, and also was the executive director of Partner in Employment. We really lost a warrior for social justice. She was going to be actually in a couple of sessions. She was going to be in the community panel session following this opening plenary, and was going to be in another session, and that just kind of shows what a leader she is. For those who don't know Amina, an immigrant to our region, worked for many years at REWA. Most recently, she started a new nonprofit, Partner in Employment. Workforce Development was one of her huge passions. And again, as I said, she was recently appointed to SeaTac City Council. She recently wrote on Facebook in her appointment, and I quote, "It's both exciting and humbling to continue serving, and I promise to work even harder to maintain the confidence and trust you have shown in me." She actually, I think, represents everything that we care about and are interested in this conference. She's a strong woman, a woman of color from the community, a mother, fighting for community, and she is truly irreplaceable, really irreplaceable. But it really is also our duty to continue her work. So I would just want to ask us to pause in a moment of silence to remember Amina and also have her family in our thoughts. Great, thank you. So to start off, I think it's interesting, as the planning committee was planning this conference, one of the things that we were doing is, as typically happens, we started thinking about, okay, who could we bring in, and really thinking about outside the region, right? We were thinking about keynotes, we were thinking about some of the panels, and I think we took a really important shift when we just said, what are we doing? We have, right here in our community, we have everybody who we need. We have the leaders, we have people here that get called to national conferences and convenings all the time. So we should actually be lifting the people that we have here from our region. So I think that's important to keep in mind that, sure, I think maybe people from outside the region might be here as well, but it's really for our particular region and how we advance racial equity within our area. And we also, the other thing too that we did is we wanted to make sure that to set the tone, this is primarily given the partner organizations that put the Governing for Regional Equity Inclusion together. It's mainly folks in government, but we also wanted to set the tone and realize that we are here because of our community and because of our residents. And we wanted to have some of our community leaders talk first to really set the tone. Sometimes I think we can get with the equity work and the racial equity work, we can get into all kinds of frameworks and fancy definitions and how do you operationalize things and tools, et cetera. But when you really get down to it, I think the work is about how do we actually serve our community, how we serve our community better, how do we serve those who've been marginalized. And these aren't just what we call often marginalized communities. They have been marginalized, and it's us in positions of government that have actually put people in the margins. So that's why it's our duty to actually put them at the center once again. So because of that, we're going to start this morning with a session that Dinah's going to be facilitating. And also, Estelle Ortega, if you're in the room, in the space, if you could also come up. We haven't seen you yet this morning, so. Okay, welcome, Dinah and Colleen.
Good morning. Welcome to the Community Leaders Session. We have Colleen here to join us, and Stella Ortega is also scheduled to be here, so we haven't seen her yet. So if you're in the building, please come forward, but otherwise, we're going to press forward. I'm Dinah Wilson with the City of Kent and also on the Planning Committee for the conference. And one of the things I do in the city, other than managing the Community Development Block Grant Program, is we have a monthly meeting with advocates who work with immigrants and refugees and people of color and underserved communities. And we've been doing that since '09 in Kent. And so this work is I'm passionate about it. And so I'm really looking forward to having a conversation with Colleen. And we'll change up a little bit, have her maybe share some things with you about herself and her vision, and then we'll get into some of the questions. And that'll also leave time for questions from the audience. So let me introduce Colleen, unless you want to introduce yourself. Yeah, I'll read the biography. This is the first time we met, and we're saying we're old friends now. Okay, Colleen Eckerhawk is an enrolled member of the Kitahawke band of the Pawnee Nation and a member of the Upper Athabascan people of Mentasta Lake. Ms. Eckerhawk is the executive director of the Chief Seattle Club, a nonprofit dedicated to the needs of Native Americans, of Native American and Alaska Native people who are experiencing homelessness in Seattle. Chief Seattle Club provides a safe and sacred place to rest, revive, and nurture the spirit of urban Native people. As the founder of the Coalition to End Urban Native Homelessness, Ms. Eckerhawk is committed to homeless advocacy and the belief that all people deserve housing, security, and unrelenting acceptance. The Seattle magazine named Colleen one of the 50 most influential women in Seattle in 2018. She was awarded the Adeline Garcia Community Service Award in 2018. Antioch University awarded her the Public Service Award also this year. The Chief Seattle Club is the winner of the 2017 Neighborhood Builder Award. Municipal League of King County named Chief Seattle Club Organization of the Year in 2016. And Crosscut Media awarded Colleen their annual Courage Award for Public Service also in 2016. She is the proud mom to 2 children and is married to Matt Hayashi. Wow, a lot. So, welcome. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
It's good to meet you.
Yeah.
And before we start, I just want to acknowledge that we had a chair also placed for Mina Ahmed. I don't know if you knew Amina, but she, as Matthias said, was really, we've been hearing that term a lot this week as we've gone to her funeral and to some of the vigils for her, a warrior. And she was so happy to be on this panel when we invited her because she's so passionate about the work, and she couldn't wait to just talk to the audience, and especially was happy that the electors would be here. And so I just want to acknowledge that, her space in the room in a lot of other ways, and in the hearts of those of us who knew her. She's just given me so much inspiration, and we're just going to carry on and carry on with even more fire. So just wanted to say that.
Thank you. Well, I've met her before, but did not have the pleasure of knowing her. But my heart goes out to her and her family and to all those who are impacted. And the whole community is impacted by these kinds of issues. So I'm just glad we had that moment of silence. Thank you, Matthias, for leading that. And this chair is very meaningful today.
Absolutely. Okay, would you just tell us a little bit about your story and especially your thoughts around racial equity before we get into our questions?
Sure. Well, thank you so much for having me. I am just really aware today of how fortunate we are to be on Muckleshoot territory. I had the good fortune to be hanging out with a tribal council member of Muckleshoot on Wednesday night. And I'm just hearing his passion and his desire for his community to be really lifted up, their voice to be really heard. And so as I begin today, I want to invite all of us to think about Muckleshoot. You may think about, they do have a really awesome casino. Their buffet is really good. Puyallups might be a little bit better, but it's really good. There's a lot of competition in any country. Whose buffet is better? But I really appreciate the Muckleshoot people, and they have had a huge impact on me. And I recognize that I am in their territory. I am an indigenous to this country, but I'm not indigenous to this place. And I always want to remember and lift up the people of this place above everything. And so I invite you to continue to think about that. You might think not just about their amazing casino and buffet, but they have had a huge impact on this region. In fact, I am fortunate to work in Pioneer Square. And one of the things I discovered about Pioneer Square, and many have heard that's called the little crossing over place, and many of the tribes use that area. And I happened to sit down with Valerie Seagrass one day, who is a Muckleshoot tribal member, and she started telling me the story from her perspective, from her family's perspective, who had been there for, since time immemorial. And she shared with me, Colleen, this used to be a really friendly place. This used to be a place where we would come out to do duck hunting. And it was a place of laughter and subsistence and knowing that we were taking care of each other, taking care of our community. And when I think about this question that we're here today to talk about, racial equity, I think that it comes back to that idea that every single person should be brought into the family with equal access, that every single person should come in and know that not only will it be equal access, but there will be someone there who reaches out and says, you belong here. You may be standing outside here and not necessarily feeling like you're a part of this or you are have a place here, but I'm gonna reach out to you because I believe we are all one family. And I am very fortunate to have an uncle who's Lakota. His name was Richard Twist, and he taught me many things. In fact, he told me at one point, Colleen, you're going to be a public speaker, and I just laughed at him. Like, I was 19 at the time. I was like, oh, Richard, I just want to flirt with your kids. I don't really care about that. But he was so he saw deeply, and he said, Colleen, one day you'll get to talk to people and be in front of a crowd like this. And he said, I want you to remember this teaching. It's a Lakota teaching, and I want to share it with you. And this teaching is that whenever you see someone, and I'm looking around this room and I'm seeing a lot of people. Good job getting here to Auburn and really early. I see a lot of you. And I see the good hearts in you. I see we're here because we care. We care that we have disproportionate rates for people of color in King County. That's why we're here. I see that in your heart. And my uncle said, Colleen, I want you to look around the room and I want you to see everyone. And I want you to remember the Lakota teaching that says that when you see someone, when you meet someone, then they belong to your family, that they become your relative, that they become a part of who you are. And I share that with you because I think that is how we will figure out racial equity, is if we look at someone and say, this is my baby, this is my cousin, this is my relative, and they deserve everything that I have. And how can I pull them forward and bring them to my table, to my family, to understand. And so that is a little bit of the work that I get to do in Seattle. I'm very fortunate to be the executive director of the Chi Seattle Club. The Chi Seattle Club, we're almost at 50 years next year. We'll have 50 years of working in King County and Seattle. It is an organization that is focused on supporting our relatives who are experiencing homelessness. I am very sad to say to you that if you are Native and you live in King County, you are 7 times more likely to be homeless. That's 1 in 35 Native people are homeless or are on the way to becoming homeless. 1 in 35. And our organization is responding to that. We are really moving quickly, actually. I came on board 5 years ago, and then another year or so later, there was the declaration that we would recognize that we have a crisis of homelessness in our region, and that there was an emergency. I took that to heart, and I said to my board and to my staff, well, we have to respond. We've been a little bit of a static organization providing for day center services for our members, but what can we do? What should we do that's more? And I want to encourage all of you with that too. I know that we're a data-rich place. We're seeing the data. We can see that we have disparities all over the place. And it's time for us to take that moment and to say, how do we stop this? What is the negative feedback loop that keeps happening over and over and over again? The Native community, we have always been systems thinkers. We've always known how to take care of our people. I always say prior to 1492, we had a 100% success rate of housing. We know how to take care of our community. And so it is important to take this seriously, that we have a crisis on our hands, and to stop for a minute and say, what is working, what is not working, and make a disruptive move. We can't do little tiny things. We have to do something huge and big and disrupt the systems that continue to perpetuate injustice on people of color. And so that is what my agency decided to do about 3.5 years ago, with fear and trembling, because it was hard. We didn't know exactly what we were going to do. But since that time, we have really moved quickly. We've grown from a staff of about 7 to a staff of 32. We have a huge rapid rehousing program that is just changing people's lives, getting people inside as fast as possible. We're building connections all over the place, partnerships that will help ensure that our folks who are encountering the system, our Native community who are encountering the system, are getting the services that they deserve. Let me give you a brief example. When I started at the T Seattle Club, we had we weren't serving children. We're an agency that serves single adults, and there was reasons for that. There's safety reasons, and there's we just wanted to protect our kids. But about 2.5 years ago, when I happened to walk into our lobby and I saw a grandma trying to access services, and then her grandkid was out on the sidewalk crying. And we couldn't do it anymore. So we started some partnerships. We partner with Seattle Public Schools, and we partner with Mary's Place. And Mary's Place came to us and they said, Colleen, we see that we're struggling with our Native community that comes to Mary's Place for shelter. They are not staying. They would much rather sleep outside in the car with their kids than come to Mary's Place. And that's because Mary's Place, and I so appreciate Marty and her team coming to us, because they recognize this isn't working. And that's part of that disruption that we all have to think about. And they came with humility and said, we're not serving this community right. And they came to me and said, we're not culturally aware enough to do this work. And I wanna recognize too that we talk a lot about cultural trainings, and we do a lot of work around making sure that we're culturally appropriate and aware. But just what I would like to encourage us all to think about cultural humility. There's no way that any one of us is going to be able to become totally aware of someone else's culture after one training, right? But can we become culturally humble? Can we be the kind of community that says, yes, you are my relative, and so I am going to do all I can to put my own assumptions aside, to push down all of my own judgments about your culture and the way that you belong and the way that you are being in this space? And can I ask you questions? Can I be on a lifelong journey towards this way of cultural humility, which means that I sit back and I ask questions and I listen and I learn from you with the full knowledge that I will never become fully immersed enough in your culture to be speaking for you. And so that's what Mary's Place did with the T Seattle Club, is they came to us and they said, what can we do? And so we've embedded case managers at Mary's Place with so we have this partnership where T Seattle Club is so partnered with Mary's Place. And now if there's a Native community that comes into Mary's Place, they call us, we get down there, we start like this interaction so that we can help support the good work at Mary's Place and the good work of our relatives who are trying to get inside. And so on Wednesday, before Thanksgiving, I happened to be still at the office at 4 o'clock, and my daughter was waiting for me to come and bake cookies, but I saw that there was someone outside our door still, and most of our case managers had gone home. And I walked outside and I met a really beautiful grandma. She was about 60 years old. She had had a stroke recently and was in a wheelchair, and she had her daughter-in-law with her too. And we struck up a conversation, and she said, well, I'm waiting for my son and his 6-year-old to come over on the ferry, and that kind of made me pause for a minute because it was clear that they had been experiencing homelessness. And I said, well, where are you gonna sleep tonight? And she said, well, we have a 2-man tent for 4 people and a 6-year-old. And that concerned me, and it should concern all of us greatly. We know that in Seattle Public Schools, about 400 Native students are homeless and experiencing homelessness. And so when I hear those numbers, it burns me. It keeps me up at night. It should cause us all to stop. When we think of the First Nations, the first people of this country, our Native brothers and sisters, our relatives, that we are the most likely to be homeless on Indigenous grounds, it should stir us, because I believe the way we solve all homelessness is to solve Native homelessness. We know that if we are out of balance as a system, if we are out of balance in our spirituality, if we're out of balance as a community, then we can't solve for what we want to solve for, right? So I am dedicated to that idea of how that we can solve all homelessness if we solve Native homelessness. And so that night in front of my building, and it was a cold, cold night, I told that family, I said, come inside, let me see what I can do. And I am definitely not a case manager. But I called the case manager who said, let me make a few calls. And I'm very happy to say that that family was inside at Mary's place within 2 hours. And I bring that story up because 4 years ago when I had started, we would not have had that outcome. We would have had that, we wouldn't have known what to do. We didn't have money, we didn't have the connections and the partnerships that we needed. And I believe that so much of understanding the race equity issues that we have in our community is because we don't know how to ask for that voice to come forward. And we don't know how to get the community right at the table. And one of the first questions that I got from this panel was, if I was mayor or county executive, what would you do to improve outcomes for residents and why? And I think that what I would do to improve outcomes for everyone is to be constantly asking, where is the Native voice in this community? Why are there not Native community at the table? Why is there not, why does it continue to be that we often have, and I say this gently because I love you all, but we often have white men making decisions on behalf of people of color. And yeah, it's true, right? And I believe in those white men. I believe that they have the best intentions and the best hearts. But we cannot solve for the crisis that we want to solve for if we do not have the community at the table making those decisions. And so in the past 6 months, we have, in King County, we have seen, in the city of Seattle, we have housed more Native people in the past 6 months than we did all of last year. Yeah, I know. I wish I was standing up so I could do a happy dance, because I am thrilled about that number. And that happened because the community came together. Let's see, 2.5 years ago, we formed the Coalition to End Urban Native Homelessness, and we all came together in Seattle and said, what are we gonna do? Like, we have to respond. Because here's something that was happening. We declared the emergency, and all the systems started just going, and I joined the All Home Coordinating Board, and I got to hang out with Mayor Bacchus. I just love you, Nancy. I'm so glad to be here with you. We started understanding the system. And let me just say this with a really friendly group here. I remember coming into the All Home Coordinating Board and the King County system. I had just started where I work. I had no idea what people were talking about, none. I was sitting at the tables, just trying to soak it all in. I often felt that I really was not wanted at that table. And I had to really endure. I always tell my team now, like, part of our resilience as a community is to endure board meetings. And to sit down. And I always say, like, you know, I come from some really strong warrior people. I'm from the Pawnee Nation of Oklahoma. Our original homelands are Nebraska and Kansas. We were moved to Oklahoma. We had our own Trail of Tears. We went from a community of 15,000 people to 600. And I am a direct descendant of those 600 people, and I think about them all the time, and I think about what they had to endure, and then I think about the plushy boardrooms that I'm sitting in, the endless coffee, and I just tell myself, you know, shut up and sit there and figure it out. And so that's what I did on the mini boards, and now, and on the All Home Coordinating Board. And we started understanding, like, what is this system about? And one of the things we saw is that through the Coordinated Entry for All system, which, if you don't know, that's a system that is supposed to rate the vulnerability of someone experiencing homelessness. And if they have high rates of vulnerability, they should float right to the top of the system and get housing first. The problem is that we don't have enough housing. So right away, we have over 5,000 people on that system. If we're lucky, we're gonna get 25 to 30 in a month. Okay, and then we know that all of this group of beautiful, beautiful people who are trying to get into that system, their hopes get up when they get on that list. They think, oh, well, I'm on this list, like, And then we can increase the trauma over and over and over again through that system. And one of the things that I saw was that I think it was in 2014, like 19 Native people got the call that you get housing. 19 people got that call and said, we have the housing ready for you. Only one person actually was housed through that system. And it killed me. Again, I'm just like, I mean, I'm telling you now, and it just like hits my stomach. Like, how could that happen? How could that be possible? So we formed this coalition, and we said, you know, what can we do as a community? The community came together. And we went to the city of Seattle and said, you know, what would it be like if our 4 agencies, United Indians of All Tribes, Mother Nation, Chief Seattle Club, and Seattle Health Board, what would it mean if we applied for some of this funding that's for the homeless community? And it was a struggle right away, because there was immediately contracting issues. Like, oh, no, because we'd have to have an individual contract with each one of you. But we're saying, no, we want to do it together. That's what we've always done, that we've always taken care of our community together. And so there was a lot of conversation, and a very long story short, we awarded about $3 million. So that $3 million started the beginning of this year. And we have seen remarkable things happen. And the reality is that the city of Seattle released all of that new money. They gave 6% of it to the Native community. They looked at the numbers and they realized that 6% of the homeless community was Native. And we got those dollars, and like I said, we have in the first 6 months of that money, we have seen a huge increase of Native community that are getting housed through Native programs in places where people feel comfortable, where they feel loved, where they know that no one is going to discriminate against them because they are Native and because of their homelessness. So I could go on, and that's just a little bit of the nutshell of the work that I get to do. And I know that we're going to continue to have a conversation. Thank you for letting me talk a long time about that.
Well, I just want to say, who said you were going to be a public speaker? They were right. But
you got to listen to your elders, I guess.
That's great.
That's
Thank you for sharing that. I just want to follow up on something you said that I think is so important, is you decided when you looked at the data, your community wasn't being properly served or served at all. And you said, why not do it together, and why not work collaboratively with people within your community? And I think that's so important, so I'm glad you did that. I wanted to ask you, government can be timid about confronting racism head on. Why do you think this is the case, and what is the most compelling argument you can make to encourage government to begin talking about racism and its impacts on outcomes? Because we often hear, it's not race, it's this, it's that. They don't, they're shy away from race. And it's not just government, but a lot of people do that. So how can we emphasize that and, encourage people to listen to the people who are experiencing it and not put that judgment on it?
That is a hard one. And I immediately want to go to the things like, well, it's because, white supremacy is so just embedded in our culture. Mm-hmm. Anti-blackness, anti-nativeness is so embedded into our systems. But honestly, I think all of you know that, right? Like, we don't have to keep saying that over and over again. I don't know if it's helpful. One of the things I've been evaluating a lot, how my communication style is working, and how we can change hearts and minds. Mm-hmm. And I don't think it's by just continuing to say white supremacy is horrible, right? It is. Mm-hmm. But how do we break through, right? And how do we tell the stories of changing hearts and minds? And well, how do we tell stories so that we can change hearts and minds? So I'll tell you a little story then, I guess. Let's see, how many years ago now? I don't know why I keep talking about years. A while ago, I was invited to speak at or give testimony at the Pioneer Square Preservation Board in downtown Seattle. Now, I, at the time, was not really aware of, I guess, you hear about historical preservation, but I hadn't really thought about it that much. So I was in this meeting, and I started to really consider where I was at. And I was thinking, man, I'm in a meeting right now that is completely focused on the historical preservation of pioneers, like Pioneer Square culture. And it just felt so gross to me and incongruent. I'm like, why am I here to give testimony in front of this group? Then I found out this group meets like all the time. Like they meet every week. They are dedicated and focused on the preservation of pioneers and that group, right? So it just kind of galled me. And so I got to give my little testimony about public safety or something. And then I said, listen, I just want to recognize that we are on Coast Salish territory. We're in the lands of the Muckleshoot and the Duwamish and the Suquamish right now. This is their land and their place. And do we not at all think about their historical preservation, their amazing knowledge systems about environmental justice and conservation and the water systems and the salmon? Like, why are we not thinking about that? Why don't we have preservation boards that are all focused on the preservation of the Native community and the Native voice and Native culture and the Native ways, because there are answers there. Our community has been so marginalized for many, many years that there are many answers to the problems that we have in this county and in this region and in this city or in this country that are not being heard. And so I said to this group, I said, we should consider their culture. And I said, let's lift them up. And so it was awkward silence after I said that. Because it was just like a bunch of architects and designers and urban planners are just like, oh, that was weird. But that's a story of my life, doing weird things like that. So I just, couldn't keep my mouth shut about it. And then, but a few people came up to me afterwards and said, thank you, and shook my hand. And the next day they called me and invited me to be on this board. So I had to say yes, because I rarely say no to things. That's the thing, I'm a major extrovert, so I love saying yes. So anyways, I said yes to this one, but, and it was something, I really started learning about historical preservation. Now, the reality is that historical preservation in this country is based in white supremacy. It's based in this idea that we need to keep people of color out of this region and out of this area, the troublemakers, the people that are going to cause these issues, and we're not going to be able to make this beautiful place in the very Western way that we want to make it. And so I've just been reflecting on preservation boards, right? The redlining that happened in Seattle. We understand that these systems are set up intentionally to ensure that we are going to be kept in our places, people of color, as Native people. And so I really started digging into this issue and thinking about what we should do. And so I apologize if some of you have heard this story. I recently told it at City too, but it was only a few people there that day. But so I had this experience where I knew that some of my Maori relatives were going to be visiting from New Zealand. So Maoris are the indigenous people of New Zealand. And I knew a few things about their culture. I knew that in the early 70s that there was only about 3 people under the age of 30 that spoke the Maori language. And they started feeling very concerned about that issue and what they were going to do. And so they came together and they started these immersion schools, these immersion language schools. So now you can go to preschool all the way through a PhD and only speak Maori. They have completely brought back the language. It is amazing. And so I know, it's huge. So I had been there many times. My brother-in-law's Maori, and I had some of the original founders of this school in my building about 3 years ago, and I said, tell me, what was it? And they said, Colleen, we realized we had to be Maori for Maori. And I said, tell me more about that. They said, we realized that we could not count on government systems to help us. And that just went deep in me. And so I started thinking about that for our community. We started the Coalition in Urban Native Homelessness, and then I started thinking, we see the data that this system isn't working for us, that our Native community are not getting housed, then we need to build our own housing. So I am very happy to say I've actually had a $10 million week. I just recently got a $10 million to my capital campaign. We go to construction in 9 months yes, I'm so thrilled. You guys all have to come to the opening ceremony. It's going to be so fun. But in 9 months, we will be in construction on 75 units of housing. And I really wish Stella was here because El Centro has led the way for us. They understand it. They have, yes, yeah, thank you. I mean, El Centro is just such an incredible community partner doing some amazing things. And so we have followed their model completely. And we are being Native community for Native community, taking care of each other. We've always known how to take care of each other. And I believe that Native-led housing is a way that we will be able to reclaim our sacred responsibilities to take care of our babies, to take care of our elders. There were all these government systems that did not allow us to do that for years and years and years, and now is our opportunity. So, to go back to the original question, our opportunities lay in our stories. Our opportunities lay in our willingness to be vulnerable. Our opportunities do not necessarily lay in continuously calling out white supremacy. I think we do have to do some of that. There are those of us who will continue to do some of that. But I think what needs to happen is for our people of color community to be called to the table, to be invited to share in our own ways, to share from our own cultural perspectives. Honestly, that's constantly challenging for me. I often have to show up at tables and work very hard to be myself because I'm immersed with other culture. It's very few, there are very few tables where there's other Native people at the table. And that can be exhausting. But I have endurance, I have the strength of my ancestors pushing me forward and saying every day, Colleen, my girl, like you have to keep going. You have to keep fighting so hard for some of the most beautiful, brilliant babies that deserve secure housing. And I would say that to all of you, my beautiful people, like we have to keep fighting so hard and telling those stories and increasing our vulnerability, increasing our willingness to share our pain and our sorrow that is associated with this trauma that we've experienced so that we can move past it into pathways of healing and wholeness and wellness and be leading around the country.
Thank you. And yeah. And you truly never know who you can really work with and collaborate with. We make assumptions about that so many times, and to reach out to people that we wouldn't ordinarily reach out to. I just want to say to the audience that we're going to leave a little time for you to submit a question or two. So if you have a question, raise your hand, and we have cards we'll hand to you, and we'll get those near the end. Okay. Government often asks how it can improve communication with residents. Is this the right question? Or can you suggest a better one? You hear that a lot. You probably do too. How can we just communicate with this group over here? How can we communicate with you? Is that the right question we should be asking?
I don't know if it's the right question, but I can at least talk a little bit about my own experience. I already mentioned that I have been on a King County board, the All Home Coordinating Board, for 4 years. I'm looking at Nancy. We've been enduring together on that board. And I deeply appreciate the people on that board. I've learned to call them my friends, and we've gone through so many hard things together, actually. And one of the hard things is just grappling with that number that Native community is not accessing the housing systems. We have the highest rates of homelessness, and just trying to figure that out. And it has been so hard. And I would say that me being at that table was important and is important. And so when we think about communication, it can't be top down. Like if you don't have someone on your team or someone who understands the community or understands cultural humility and is willing to just engage and be in the community and be in that storytelling space, to be in that vulnerable, cultural, humble space where you're saying, I really don't know about how that works in your community. And could you tell me? Could you help me understand? So I I think that, communication is always tricky for any community, and I don't have it totally figured out. But I think that being and having that place at the table is the essential part of it.
Okay. Now, I can't wait to ask you this question. It has been said that the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different result. What is government doing over and over without much improvement, and what would you suggest we change to get a different result?
Oh my God, there's so many things. Oh, wow. Because I'm immersed in homelessness, I guess I'll just jump into that we have housing systems and that are set up really for my community to fail in them. They're not correct. They're not right. And I think in bigger picture, and I mentioned this already, as a systems thinker, as an indigenous thinker, I think that what we have to do is be disruptive. Be disruptive. If you see that there is a system that is continuing to fail people over and over again, and we have the data, it's clear what's not working. It's very clear what's not working. If you are not doing something disruptive to that system, then don't do it, right? Thank you. That is huge. If you don't hear anything else from me, disrupt that system. And that's going to have to be led by some of our electeds, because if we disrupt that system, it's going to be disruptive. It will be hard, it will be challenging, and it will be exhilarating. So I invite you to be courageous and as bold as you possibly can. If you're not looking at those numbers and saying, what bold action do I take today around this, then we're not asking ourselves the right questions. So a disruptive movement to those systems. And we have incredibly, so many negative feedback loops all over the place where we see something's not working, and then we just keep doing it, and then we maybe make a little blip here, but then we just keep doing it, then it keeps going, and then it's over and over and over and over again, where negative outcomes continue to happen. Those are the places where we have to change those systems. So I could talk more, but that's my big takeaway from that question.
That's a great answer. Do we have any questions from the audience that people have written on cards yet?
While I bring him up, I'll say I failed to mention this part at the end of my story about my the Pioneer Square Reservation Board and my building, is that our building will be have indigenous design on the outside, which is a disruption to Pioneer Square. They're used to they're used to looking like a certain way, and we're playing their game. And the interesting thing is, because I was on that board, I know how to play that game. We also know the people, right? And so the actual willingness for it to look like a native building from the outside is actually so strong, and we're really thrilled to see the impact of a very different looking building right in the heart of the colonized, post-genocidal heart of oldest place in Seattle.
Okay. Yeah. Before we ask one of the audience questions, I just want to share with you, we received a note that Estella is ill today, so that's why she couldn't be with us. So we hope she feels better soon. One of the questions I wanted to ask you is, it has to do with homelessness. What are the principal reasons why Native Americans become homeless, and are those different reasons than for other ethnic groups?
Love that question. I get to do lots of talks about that one. I'm happy to come to anybody's thing on this one, and I could do it in my sleep, because it is so important for us to understand why we have so many Native community who are homeless. The first thing that happened, as I already mentioned, is that in 1492, there was a terrible disruption that happened. And we had many of our people who were just moved off our traditional homelands. That was our first action of homelessness is in this country, is when our Native community were moved off our tribal lands, where we had everything, where our systems were amazing, and our systems for caring for our families were so strong. And then we were moved to a place where none of that worked. In my own situation, my family was in Nebraska and Kansas. We were moved to Oklahoma. Well, we're an agricultural farming community. We brought all of our seeds with us, and we kept them with us. When people died along the way, we went through their things and got their seeds so that we could make sure that we could sustain our lifestyle in Oklahoma, or as we called it, the hot place. And so when we got to Oklahoma, we tried to plant all of our seeds to recreate these systems of agriculture that were amazing, and the seeds wouldn't grow. And the seeds wouldn't grow, and the seeds would not grow, and many of our communities experienced it. That was our first experience of homelessness in the Native community. Then we had the experience of the boarding school systems, where Native children were taken away from our relatives, from our ancestors, and were pushed out into boarding school systems that were rooted in this phrase. The philosophy of the Indian boarding school was kill the Indian and save the man. So we had that as our second experience of homelessness, where our children were taken away. And in fact, that was kind of cemented or a nail in the coffin around the impact, or the realization that we were in a genocide. If you look at the 1948 United Nations Accord on Genocide, what happened to my relatives fits every single category. So we are in a post-genocidal state here in our country. And so we are, that is it's just part of the homelessness that we're experiencing today. So we had the move to reservations. The second was the boarding school systems. The third was the Urban Indian Relocation Act. That happened in 1956, where the government said, hey, through the Bureau of Indian Affairs, which at that time was under the Department of War. Yes, for a long time, the Bureau of Indian Affairs was under the Department of War. And so that has its own significant trauma associated with it. But the Bureau of Indian Affairs said, hey, let's move these Native people out of reservations and move them into cities. And so thousands and thousands of Native people were moved into cities around the country, including like Seattle and Chicago and New York and LA. Like LA and New York have some of the highest numbers of Native people that live in one spot. LA and New York. Native people live in urban centers. About 70% of Native people live in urban places. So that third action of moving Native people into cities is what also has ensured that we have these very, very high rates of homelessness.
Thank you. We're actually going to have a session later on, sort of like segregation and displacement and the historical impact of what happens to people of color, especially. I think it's so important to understand that, because sometimes when we're talking about some of these issues, we think that this just happened yesterday. Yeah. I mean, today, rather, but there's a long history as to why those things happen. One other question I wanted to ask you is, it has to do with contracting, because you talked a lot about contracting. And it says, how can government make it easier for community-based organizations to receive contracts and compensation? Mm-hmm. What are some best practices and worst practices? There also will be a session about that issue this afternoon, too. So.
Oh, I don't know if I'm really the best person to answer that. I would just say that I guess the awareness that contracts were set up to keep people of color out, right? Just that real awareness. And then again, if it's not working, disrupt it hard. Like maybe, there shouldn't be a written contract. Maybe it should be all verbal. That's what the Native community would do. And, we have I don't have my cell phone here, record on your cell phone. Okay, there we go. We have a legal contract. Like just do something different. Like, don't keep creating these huge systems that are so clunky for smaller organizations that are actually doing the work. And so those are such barriers. I was talking to an agency the other day who was telling me, we're not applying for Best Starts for Kids again. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, no, like it was set up for you. Like, you should do it. And they're like, we can't do it. It's so much bureaucracy. It's killing us. And we know that Best Starts for Kids was set up so that it wouldn't have that effect, right? It was supposed to have the opposite thing. So disrupt it. Like, that means that, I just came up with that idea right now, but I think it's maybe a good one. Like, forget the written contracts. Like, do it all verbally and record every single thing of it, right? That'll challenge our attorneys. Sorry, but challenge it. So that's all I have on
Okay.
that.
All right, that's a good idea. In closing, is there an issue, a question that we didn't ask you that you want to address? And if not, you can just give closing remarks to wrap it up. Is there something especially about you got all these government people in the room that you want to say to them? You know?
I mean, you know what I would say? It's I know a lot of you. You're such good people. You're so good. I think that, one of the things I say to some of my own community members, because they don't know some of the electeds, they're like, they're terrible and they blah, blah, blah. I'm like, no, you don't know. Like, they're good. They're trying so hard to make change. And so I think that I would, if I was going to say anything to all of you beautiful elected people, it's like, thank you for your hard work, and keep working harder, and keep funding things like this, and keep understanding that, especially if you're a white person, understand that we need you to lift up the voice of those who are most marginalized, and at times step back. That's the other thing. I've seen some elected people just doing such a good job of stepping back to push forward the voice of a Native person, or to push for the voice of someone whose voice has traditionally not been asked to be there. I think that we have an opportunity in this region to lead around the country, right? Like, Best Starts for Kids. I mean, I don't know about you guys, but I was thrilled when the idea came out. It was just like, oh my God, so great. And yes, it has its problems, but is it great? Yes, we have to just be pumped up about that, recognize that it's not working perfectly, evaluate it, and change the system as quickly as possible. And I would say that if I was going to say something to our electeds and to our wonderful government bureaucratic workers that are here, is that we have to do things faster. The evaluation has to happen much more quick, and we have to we have to strategize around that, about how we can move these systems, that as soon as we know that they're not working, to make a change as soon as possible. I am full of hope. I will say this, that this summer, and I'm an extremely hopeful person generally, like the glass is always way, way half full for me. And I'm like, just generally a happy person. I'm very, very lucky that way. But this summer, I experienced about a week of just disheartening depression. It was right after the smoke. The baby orca and the mother carrying the baby orca around was just like, it was so deep. It hurts. And I think that it was good for me to experience that, and I'm so grateful that I don't experience that. And it was good for me to understand how heavy it is. And I think that if I could say anything to you all, is that if you're feeling the heaviness and the weight and the burden of trying to understand, this race equity issue, and trying to we're looking at these numbers and saying, wow, the disparity is so hard, and even in this county where we have such good intentions, we can't get past it. Like, I invite you all to feel that, and then to remember how far we have come, and how far and how much good we can do together as a community. Having events like this, I hope, fill you with inspiration and ideas, and the willingness to move and to take action and to be bold. That's my final thing I will say to you all. I often have a slide at the end of my talks that say, how big is your brave? Like, we need brave people in this community, in this society right now. I am often a disruptor at this point in my life, and I'm an incredible people pleaser, so that's hard for me. I just want to please all of you generally. But we have human suffering on the other side of this. It's not a joke. Humans, babies are dying, are suffering, and need our support and our hope. and our continued movement forward. So fight harder. Pull together your community around you. Pull together your teams and say, how are we going to fight harder today for this baby who was 6 years old sleeping in a tent for 2 weeks? What are we going to do to ensure that human suffering is not a part of our conversation in King County, that we have worked as hard as we possibly can to make these amazing changes? So I wish I could meet you all because I'm sure we'd be friends. But I thank you for giving me the time. I'm really so sad that Estella, who is my role model, is not here today. I just sending her good thoughts and wishes for her wellness. But El Centro de la Raza is one of an incredible organization that we look up to greatly, and they support us all the time. So I invite you to, like, if you don't know about them, check out their website. Just know that they're just amazing. And also check out the Muckleshoot Casino when you get a chance, 'cause it's fun. And also know that it's not just the Muckleshoot Casino, but the Muckleshoot community is leading the way in environmental justice. I wish that, I was telling one of the council members the other night, I was like, I wish that, you guys were, spreading, they're really humble. They're not telling everybody about this. And Nancy's nodding her head. You know this. They are investing millions and millions of dollars in ensuring that our salmon are going to be still here 20, 30 years from now. They're investing millions of dollars with our beautiful trees and environment. So know that the Muckleshoot community in this area are just an incredible, incredible community. And I could talk a long time about them, but thank you for having me. Thank you, my old friend.
You're welcome. Thank you. It was great having the one-on-one conversation, and you shared so much that we'll just buoy us as we go out for the rest of the day. And I agree with you. Estella's wonderful. She shares so much about their housing and all the work that they've done. So I hope she feels better soon. And if you haven't had a chance to meet her, I hope you get a chance to meet her. She's wonderful. So thank you for listening to us, and enjoy the rest of the day.